I call this being functionally paranoid. It's a functional paranoia that you're always looking for what's going to go wrong. And every business owner that is out there listening to this right now understands exactly what I'm talking about because something always happens. All right, today we are talking about cadence still, and we're in the third discipline of cadence, which is drills. Now, on a ship, drills make up a part of our life. So you have monthly drills, you have quarterly drills, you have annual drills, you have different drills for different types of scenarios. And what the drill, the mentality and or the purpose of the drill is to prepare the crew to respond in a certain way in a time of crisis. Now, the crisis could be a fire, it could be a health scare, it could be taking on water. There's all kinds of different things that could go wrong out at sea in the dynamic environment and ever-changing environment that sailors have to operate. So sailors all have to be prepared. We have to prepare for those things that possibly could happen so that when if it does happen or when it does happen, the crew is ready to respond with a plan. Same is true for your business. Every business has vulnerabilities. Every business has risk. The question is whether or not you take the time to document what the risk is and come up with mitigation plans to operate instead of operating out of panic and trying to figure it out on the fly. And so many business owners find themselves stuck in that mentality of, well, everything's great. So why should I rock the boat? I call this being functionally paranoid. It's a functional paranoia that you're always looking for what's going to go wrong. And every business owner that is out there listening to this right now understands exactly what I'm talking about because something always happens. And how many times have you been caught off guard by something seemingly coming out of left field? Part of it, you don't know what you don't know, but the other part of it is not taking the time to look, right? Not taking the time to investigate. Where am I exposed? Good investors do this really well because investors are trained to look at the downside. What's the likelihood of success, the probability of success? If some success is not achieved, what am I putting at risk? That's the investor mentality. And it's really smart because it allows you to look at things from a risk first perspective. What can go wrong? Business owners needs to take more time to look at what could go wrong and come up with a plan before it happens it so that they're not trying to bring something up from scratch. They're not trying to operate from a playbook that doesn't exist. And it's not just enough to have the playbook written down. It's not enough just to have the risk identified and to have a mitigation plan written down. You actually have to train. That is why every month there's a fire drill. Every month there's a fire drill on the ship where we have to suit up in the bunker gear, where we're practicing using the fire hoses, where we're, that constant training, the drill, going through the motions when there's no risk, well, there's no external risk going on. Going through the motion builds that muscle memory. So it's important that you not just identify and don't stop at writing a plan down, but you have to go all the way to making a regular cadence of actually drilling the plan. That's the only way to truly know that your team knows how to respond. And so for instance, in your business, it could be all kinds of different things. Some of you operating in trades, it may actually be a safety emergency. It may be somebody has a heart attack. It may be somebody gets shocked. It may be that there's a major catastrophe, right? Something happens, and you need to provide immediate assistance to your team or to your client or to customers, whatever. That could be real for you, but it also could be financial shocks, right? What happens if that line of credit disappears? Could happen. What happens if what happens if all of a sudden you get hit with a lawsuit? What are you going to put in place? So there's different things in your business that if you take the time to look at and all the different things, look at every department, look at every aspect, every function of your business. Where is it exposed? And then write down a plan of what you can do to overcome those exposures, right? To mitigate the downside. Here's the tool that I was taught as a sailor. It's called a risk assessment. So there's two things. There's two parts to a risk assessment. One is the likelihood that the risk will happen against the consequences based on a scale of magnitude. So if you have something that is likely to happen and is super dangerous, is going to totally sink your ship, that is something that you want to create a plan for. And the goal is that you create contingencies that bring that downside, that either lower the likelihood of it happening or that lower the consequences of it happening. So that's where you start to come up with a mitigation plan. Is you look at the scale and you say, okay, what can I do to either lower the likelihood that this happens or lower the intensity of the negative consequences that come when this takes place. That's the system and the mental processes that you have to go through when you're going through a risk assessment. And then you go to create your plans, your mitigation plans, because then you go back to your risk assessment. Okay, now that I have this plan, did I lower the likelihood that this is going to happen, or did I reduce the consequences, the negative consequences, if and when it does happen? From there, once you have a matrix that makes sense, then you go and then you start drilling those, right? That's when you take it to the team and say, okay, guys, here's what we got. And then through the drilling process, you'll actually discover more things. More data points will come back like, oh, that didn't work exactly the way you thought it was going to work. This actually would be better. That's when you start getting on the iterative process. Oh, okay. Function, like the idea was good, but the implementation or how we wanted it to be implemented actually didn't make any sense, because when we're on the ground, I don't have access to this tool, or I don't have access to this information, or fill in the blank, right? But that's how you start to build a risk mitigation drill schedule. And the reason that this needs to be on a cadence is because if it's not planned, it'll never happen. It never becomes a priority to do these things, to do these risk assessments, if it's not on a schedule. And ships have been operating like this for decades and centuries, honestly, of drilling and practicing these rhythms and these operating rhythms. If you cannot look at, you have to take the time to look at your business to see what's going to derail you and knock you off course or potentially put you on the rocks and sink your ship, and come up with those plans and those strategies to help mitigate when those occur. Your team is already locked and ready with the right strategy and the right knowledge and the right practice, so that you're not suffering the bad stuff. You're not suffering catastrophe or even putting your whole company at risk of total loss. Uh, your team can operate still effectively and efficiently. That's what a drill does. That's what installing drill into your operating cadence can do for you. When you need it, it shows up. Subscribe. The Alex Hayes, Fractional COO, to keep learning more. Stay on course.